Yep, we're live, Chair, so you can start now.
Brilliant. Thank you for your attendance tonight. This is the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 9th of September. The first item on the agenda is apologies of absence. Do we have any apologies for absence tonight?
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Churchman, so Councillor Piccolo is substituting.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that. I wasn't at the last meeting, so I'll defer to other people on the minutes. Is everyone happy with the minutes, or does anyone want to speak about the minutes?
Yeah, can I, Luke?
Yep, Councillor Edsel.
Please, just to say that a couple of my questions have been done twice, so I don't know if it was an oversight.
So yeah, if you could look after that, Wendy, it'd be fantastic. Does anyone else have any questions about the minutes? Everyone okay? Good.
Great.
So if we could approve the minutes.
Approved.
Good stuff.
Approved.
No one's brought any urgent items of business tonight, although I'm sure that so perhaps Carol might want to say a few words about the big news in housing this week in a second. Obviously I'm talking about the news about Roger, but I just wanted to bring one thing to you all, and that was just, and it's quite simple really, it's how you want these meetings to go forward from now on. I'm quite, having sat in several hybrid meetings, I'm quite keen on making this a hybrid meeting going forward, but I didn't want to just, I wanted to do that with agreement of the committee. I'm not expecting I mean, I know these meetings work perfectly fine through Teams, so I'm not expecting officers to, have to attend if physically in person if they don't have to, but personally I'd prefer to attend in person. So has anyone got any objections to hybrid meetings going forward?
No, I'm fine with that. Absolutely.
Excellent. Good news. So Carol, do you want to, could you say a few words about, obviously, because people
I will, Chair. Yes, thank you. This is a surprise for me too. Yes, I don't know, some of you may have seen an email. There was an email that went out to all staff. I don't know if it went out to all councillors earlier this week, which explains that Roger Harris, who's the Corporate Director for Adults, Housing and Health, will be leaving the council at the end of March. And so a recruitment process will take place sometime soon to replace him. Roger, in a conversation with me before the news was made public, said he wasn't using the R word. So Roger is not retiring, but he is going to pursue other interests and do different things, and hopefully not work as hard as he does now. So yes, he will be here. He's not leaving till March. He's on leave this week, so that's why he's not at this meeting. I'm sure you will all see him again before he goes and be able to say your own farewells to him. I'm absolutely sure that he is not going to slack off in any way, shape or form, and he will still be working just as hard as he always has until he leaves.
Thank you very much. I know that if I gave everyone the chance, there'd be probably quite a lot of praise heaped upon Roger, but we've got, I'm assured that he's going to be turning up to several more housing committee meetings, so we can lavish him with praise when we know that he's going to leave. I'm sure he won't slack off, and I think I speak for anyone who just says, he's been an absolute star for this council, and we look forward to making our own personal statements later, at a later date. The next item is declarations of interest. Has anyone got any declarations of interest this evening?
None.
Councillor Edsel? Councillor Edsel? Are you muted, Joy?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can now, yeah.
Yeah, not really an interest, but just to say that the first lot of garages that have come up are in my ward. So just make it known, that's all. Thank you.
Fair enough. I know you've got equal interest for every garage in the borough, Joy, so...
Definitely, yeah.
And we look forward to that item. So we'll start with something not remotely controversial, shall we? So we'll go on to item 5, which is the Housing Development Programme update. And I believe, is it Keith that's going to be introducing this? Go ahead, Keith.
Thank you, councillors. Okay, so this is a continuing process of reports that we have been bringing to this committee since February of this year. And as we say, we've presented a number of reports that established a list of council-owned development options sites to be taken forward. And that's for detailed work, and that would involve engagement with stakeholders and communities. And we've noted all the way through it, it'll be possible to add additional sites, but also amendments to the programme to take back and take off sites, and then report those back to this committee. So that has been happening on a regular basis since February. First point to note really is that following local resident comments and after due consideration, the portfolio holder for housing has now agreed that the site at Emborne Crescent, which is in South Ockenden Ward, be withdrawn from the list. So that's a note. But that means that the site's option list now currently stands at 15 locations in total, and that could potentially deliver up to 699 new homes. And it should be reinforced, as I do every meeting, that these figures remain largely indicative at the moment until schemes have been progressed, so the detailed assessments been completed, and community engagement has gone through in the fashion that we went through at the last meeting in June, when we set out a process for engaging with stakeholders, including members and the community. Progress and the current position on the sites that we have left within the programme that are already on the list is set out on the appendix. For many of them, some community engagement on the initial thoughts and proposals will be the next step once we've completed our preparatory work. Also, it's worth noting that it came up from the last committee that, in line with members' wishes, some of the sites have been renamed, and that's to better describe their location. Although it's fair to say that the red line boundaries of the sites themselves that we brought to this committee way back in February haven't changed. It's just that we've taken advice from committee and renamed them more appropriately so that they're clearer where those sites actually are. So that's the process, and that's where we are. We have the sites option list at the appendix, and the other matter just really to note is that I will draw your attention to the completion of the 29 new homes for rent within the housing revenue account that were completed and handed over to the council to put into housing management and to go through the housing revenue account process for allocations in the normal way, and they come over on 29th of June. The next project for completion is the 53 unit site, currently well underway, heading towards completion in Claudian Way in Chadwell St Mary. In fact, we took the first of those dwellings over into management this week, and the remainder of them will be coming over the next month or just so. And the other projects that we currently have underway, that is at Calcutta Road in Tilbury, which we expect to take possession of the completion of the works in the summer next year. That is for 35 properties for older persons, and all of these homes will be for the housing revenue account for the council to allocate through its normal processes. So that's really a summary of my report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I'm sure there's going to be a few questions here. I mean, from the report, the main thing is that the first things that worry me from the report, and should worry all residents that are in those areas, is that there's question marks over a couple of council and important social and community assets that are currently in those locations. I'm thinking about obviously the adult community college, where there's question marks about the future of the Adult Community College, but I'm also thinking about the Village Hall in Averley as well, and you know, reassurance about the, you know, whether there's going to be complete like-for-like provision of the library services. Now, I've got quite a lot of knowledge about the change of the library services in Averley, but I think it would be quite good if you could provide reassurances that, you know, that library is not just going to disappear. And so if you could take the opportunity to clarify those 2 points, I'll be really pleased.
Okay, thank you. I think what I can say is from the adult education position is that there's no suggestion of the loss of that facility over in Richmond Road. It might be that it's possible to provide it in more accessible locations. So there's an improved service. So that's the information from our education colleagues. There's, as I say, there's no suggestion of losing that facility. Just potentially, it might be possible to relocate, and then of course that would open up the site for wider housing development if members wish to see that there. The Averley one, I'm afraid I would need to go back and get the full details on that. It's not a project I'm engaged in. What I do know is that there will be need for some full community consultation on the use of that site and any proposals there before it even comes forward as a housing development site. So I think there's quite a way to go, is my understanding, before anything could even potentially be considered for a redevelopment. So I'm afraid that doesn't quite give you all of that comfort I think you were asking. I think the comfort will be there. It simply isn't something that I know about, but I'm sure we can take that away and report you back.
I know, Wendy. Do you know what the order is of questions? Have you seen the order, or should I just call people out as I go? Is Wendy there? I think I saw Councillor Abbas put his hand up first. So why don't you go ahead, Councillor? Oh, you're muted. I think you're muted.
Sorry, my apologies. Thank you, officer, for your report. Obviously, we all are concerned, how these sites have been identified, and then again and again we are being told, these are just sites, but we can see clearly the work is being done. Even there are some, we can see architects, they have completed some work, the sites have been removed, there have been new sites. But you have mentioned here that the map is attached and red line, but you can't really see where this map is, to see actually, have you extended those sites or have you decreased the size of those sites? So I think it would have been better, if you would have included the maps of these sites. So this is my first question. And the second is obviously, as the chair has mentioned, on this Averley Hall. So what are your plans for this hall? Are you going to build as part of these 9 units anything on this hall, or there would be something different? And I think I will ask you another question as well before passing on this Thurrock community college. Obviously you have give this indication maybe you can offer them something better or something more accessible, but obviously when we get these hints, so eventually we see those services are gone, those buildings are removed, or things are happening. It starts with these initial points, so we are really concerned. So can you please clarify on these 3 questions, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so I'll try to take them in the order that you raise them. So that we haven't changed any of the red line boundaries. They simply are the ones that were reported initially way back in February, and we did have our infographics as part of that information pack for that committee. I see no problem at all. We can bring that back again as an aid memoir to a future committee if that's required. We're happy to do that. Simply was just renaming them in line to make it more transparent and picking up as members' advice what they would like to see them called. So that hopefully reassures you that we haven't changed any of those red lines, and the process would allow that to be reported back should there be any changes. So there has been no change to the red line bound. I think I can only repeat what I said earlier in terms of both the Aveley Hall and the community college. Certainly the college understand the position is that there's no suggestion of a loss of facility. It's simply that there might be an opportunity to make it available in a more accessible location. And if that was the case, that would require consultation, and only then would that site be brought forward for redevelopment potentially. There's no more that I can offer you at this stage. There's no more certainty that I can offer you at this stage, other than, as I say, there's no suggestion of a loss of that facility. It's my lack of understanding in terms of the other parts of the council's operation, in terms of the Aveley Hall. Where I would come into it, and my team would come to it, is if that site is made available for development, then we would look to provide affordable housing potentially on that site. So what I will do, as with Councillor Spielman, I'm very happy to go away back to the relevant services and ensure that comfort that you're seeking is brought back to you, Councillor. It's not that it's not there, it's just it's my I don't know the details of that particular site until it gets available, if it becomes available for a housing project.
I see that Councillor Abbas has got a follow-up, so please go ahead.
Yeah, just on this community college and this Aveley Hall, my concerns are like, if there are no plans, then why we are mentioning these things? Why we are kind of like, putting these kind of scary news, like, that we are kind of scaring residents, and this is obviously a matter of concern. We can't just say they will get better facilities or like accessible something. This building has been there, the college has been there, for I don't know for how many years, So before mentioning certain things, I personally believe is like, purposefully to make up kind of mind, so people know like this is going. So what are we going to retain? Why we are putting these kind of wording or buildings which are public buildings and are of public concern in these sites?
Councillor Abbas, can I just interject here because Keith has been through this several times. If your concerns about the adult college really and the future of the adult college or anything that might change about its buildings are really better directed towards the education service, because neither Keith nor I can really speak to the future of the buildings or the services provided there. I realise there's a line on the list about it, but that's about a future. It's not about what this site that's on the list relates to. It's just if there was anything did happen to the adult college in the future, that site would then be expanded. But really, neither Keith nor I can competently answer questions about the future of the adult college because neither one of us knows enough about it. I know what I do know is that Councillor Kent raised an inquiry, but Councillor John Kent raised an inquiry about it, and that he received a response from the Director for Children's Services. But I haven't seen that full response, but I know that she is aware of the concern of members about the line in this report. So I'm sure that she can provide you with a response, but I'm afraid neither Keith nor I know enough about the situation there to really answer your questions to the level of knowledge and detail that you want. I'm afraid we just don't have the information there.
No, we are not questioning you on those. We are just asking you to clarify why you have mentioned in your report.
Keith has mentioned it in his report because if the college were to move, then the site would be bigger than it currently is. But the site that is in here does not include the land that the college is on. It's just a potential for the future, but the site that is mentioned in here does not include the land for the college. The site in here is regardless of what happens to the college in the future.
I think that was important to clarify because it was inevitable that several councillors were going to bring up this question as soon as they saw that in the report. So I'm glad that you've clarified that. Should we say Councillor Ridsell, I think was next.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I'm glad they've come up on here because at least we've got some consultation to come and at least we know what's happening. We might not know in the education part, but at least we know, and then it will come to consultation, so we will have a say on it. My question to Keith, the 699 new homes, does that include Tops and Chadwell St Mary, or is that separate from those two?
Thank you, Councillor. No, the Tops, the Chadwell St Mary and the Calcutta Road one in Tilbury are all in addition to the 699.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Have you not got a follow up there, Joy?
No, thank you. No,
Right.
mine.
Stuff. Lynn?
There are
Yeah,
two
can
Lynn's,
I-
Chair.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I'll go first. Sorry, Lynn Mansfield first. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, can I just ask a question? I'm not really up on all the areas where you are. On Richmond Road, are you pulling down properties to do this, or is there actual empty land there to put these properties on?
Okay, so just thank you, Lynn. So just picking up the point that Carol made, the red line boundary that has always been there actually works around the existing buildings, and so of course, so that which are in a poor condition in terms of open vacant land at the moment. So that's currently where we stand. We're not proposing at this point to demolish anything, to do anything of that nature. It simply would be infill. But of course, if the wider site becomes available, the red line could potentially be expanded, and that would of course lead to that sort of activity. But so at the moment, it's not looking to demolish.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a follow up, Lynn M?
No, I'm okay, thank you.
Councillor Lynn Worrell. You're on mute. You're muted, Lynn.
Right, thank you, Chair. That must be the saying of the year, I think. You're muted, or can you hear me? So first of all, I'd just like to welcome the removal of Embourne Green from the development list, and and this, at least having it removed, allows those residents to carry on enjoying their green spaces and the peace of mind that they're no longer now or at any time going to face losing their green space outside their homes.
Here.
Yeah.
I'd also, it is disappointing to see that Elm Park's still on there. It is a park, and the residents are just as opposed to this being on there, and it would be wrong of me to not raise that here tonight, that I'm totally opposed to our park that sits in my ward. I'm quite happy to say that it sits in my ward, but it is a park, and in the current pandemic, it's used by people from all over the borough and not just people that live over on that ward. So I'd kind of hope that the cabinet member in due course removes that when he gets the rest of the opposition from the community over there that are working to present that to him as soon as possible. I was going to raise about the adult community college, but I won't. But I think why it got raised is it's the first time that it's ever been written, actually, that it is under a review. And of course, we need a Grays Adult College. Maybe we can get a brand new, sparkling, better, greater adult community college out of this if we was to lose that one. So that may be something that's a good thing for it to be on this list. So I do have a question about following the last scrutiny meeting, it became public knowledge that Thurrock Regen is not now operating in its current format, and that papers were being written. So could we have an update on where Thurrock Regen is? Because I believe that there is some planning coming this way that could well be that we will be using the vehicle of Thurrock Regen for that.
As you've said, there has been speculation about the future of Thurrock Regeneration Limited, but the council has not made any formal decisions about the future of Thurrock Regeneration Limited. So the only thing that any member of the cabinet has said, as far as I'm aware, in public is when Councillor Hebb made a speech at cabinet, and he said what he had asked officers to prepare a paper on a mixture of different development options. That paper is in preparation. David Moore is working on that paper, and that no decisions will be made about the future of TRL until that paper had been considered. So at the moment, TRL still exists. It isn't developing anything, but it is still managing the St Chad's development that it was the first development that it did. So it's still there. It's still a company. The council is the sole shareholder. It's a going concern.
Do you want to follow up, Lynn?
Yeah, so what I was trying to get to, I suppose, is we're moving closer and closer, and we've got 600 and odd houses that we could possibly be built. How do you propose that we will finance these? Is it government grants? Is it own ours? Is it TRL? Are we selling land? You know, how are we actually going to finance it in such difficult times?
It would be a combination of, if I speak for what's within the HRA, because those are the things that I know best, it would be a combination of borrowing and the use of our right to buy receipts. So that's the way that we have financed the previous HRA developments, as far as I'm aware. Keith will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been a combination of prudential borrowing, which is paid where the cost of the borrowing is paid back through the rents that the people pay, and a contribution of a third, because that's the maximum that you can put in from the right to buy receipts. Keith, do you want to follow up and tell me if I've got anything wrong there?
No, you've nothing wrong. All I would add is that if any of the units are developed for shared ownership, then we would be able to access Homes England grants for those. And we know that there's been a very recent announcement about a large funding programme being made available. So if there's any homes that come through that we wish to develop for shared ownership where the use of right to buy receipts isn't permitted, then the alternative is to make use of the grant through the Homes England programme.
Would you like to follow up on that, Lynn?
Yeah, could you just tell me about how it works about disposing of land? So like the Culver fields, how do we take that? Because that land is owned by Thurrock residents rather than the council. So what's the process of that going over into a private development, and how do we ensure that we get best value for selling that land, even if it is to our own wholly owned company?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I think we raised this in last meeting, and I'm not sure whether the answer came back, and perhaps it didn't. But my understanding is that any decision to dispose of land in that way would be subject to full council, and the requirements for achieving best value are a statutory requirement placed on the local authority in any event. So there will be public scrutiny of the reports if it comes to that point, that would set out all of the details as much as it can be done in a public forum. So it's a cabinet decision.
That comes to council.
Sorry, a full council decision. That's right. Sorry.
Thank you very much. And I've got one last question, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, Lynn, of course. Yeah.
So when we're looking at the housing development list, and we've seen much is needed around homelessness and like quick accommodation that we need, why do we not build our own HMOs and, you know, short term? We could really do with building our own HMOs here. I just wondered why there's a reason why we don't do that.
We did last year purchase the Brookhouse Hostel. I mean, we didn't develop it ourselves, but we did buy it, and we are now running that as a council owned and managed hostel. So I think it's not something that's necessarily easy to do. It's not something that it's not the easiest thing to do. And also we are working in partnership with Head Start through the Housing Department and the Children's Services. So where we see HMO opportunities, they tend to go more towards Head Start because they have a capital funding bid to spend money on HMOs to bring young care leavers back into the borough from outside the borough. So they tend to go to them rather than we take them ourselves. So yeah, it's something maybe we need to look into a bit more, but generally we tend to focus on permanent housing rather than new temporary accommodation.
Thanks. If I could just come back, and I'll tell you why I asked this. I think that we pay outside borough councils a fair amount of our money when we could have our own HMOs and keep our money in Thurrock. And it would also save families being displaced and then having the worry about, I mean, we've just been through it this summer. They was out of the borough for 3 months and they would have to move to school, you know, and it was only by the chance of luck that, you know, this got stopped. And I just think that this would take a lot of it away if we had our own HMOs, really.
We would need an awful lot of HMOs, and as I understand it, there are objections on the planning committee to new HMOs at times, and so, you know, it's not as straightforward as it might seem. We would need a lot of HMOs for all the families that we currently have in temporary accommodation.
Well, just maybe something that we should keep our eye on, Carol, you know.
If something comes up and we're able to afford to buy it and it's in the right place and it, like Brookhouse did, and it delivers the right kind of accommodation, then absolutely. I mean, obviously, as I say, we're working with Head Start and identifying properties, making sure we spec the refurbishment cost to make them into the HMOs that they need. But even that, we're not finding, you know, it's quite hard to find the right sort of property to make a good HMO. I think Head Start might be trying to come in.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was just going to ask about Head Start. That's not St Mungo's, is it?
No, that's the council. It's the council.
Are we still working with St Mungo's then for our homeless?
No, the contract was recently relet, and the contract since the 1st of September is now with Sanctuary Housing.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. I didn't know that. Thank you.
But Head Start is a council service run by a team in the council.
Okay. I can't see your picture, Councillor Baker, for some reason on my screen. But if you've got your hand up,
yeah. Oh, it's Councillor Redsall. I mean, you've got a hand up.
Yeah.
So, Councillor Baker.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yeah, you can. Go ahead.
Can you? Oh, cool. Thank you, Chair. Just getting back to the Culver Centre, the green there. Obviously, we're all aware that green has been used for recreational purposes for the people that live in and around the area. It's well used. The children play there. People like to walk their dogs there. It's very, very popular part of South Ockenden. Can we not look at not building on that, or looking at some kind of leaving that part alone and just build where the Culver Centre site is? That's it, Chair. Thank you. Did you get that, Chair?
Yeah, we've got that. Do you want to answer that, Keith?
Okay, sure. I mean, I think probably the thing to say is that we have been through 2 very detailed consultation processes, quite extensive with the local community, and certainly there was strong resistance to building on all of that area as Councillor Baker sets out. The last iteration of the designs there retained much more of that open space within a revised design, and so I think the response to the consultation acknowledged those concerns from the community, and whilst not all of that field has been retained, significant portions both within there and within the site of the Culver Centre as well as also be available for amenity space. So I do think the council has listened to the views of the local community in the way that it's adapted the initial proposals to give much more, to ensure much more of that amenity space is retained.
Brilliant. Would you like a follow-up, Chris?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So, I can only just tell you what the people feel. They're very, very unhappy. They don't want no building that green field. They want it left as it is. I'm sorry to say that. That's the people's wishes. They live there, in and around the area. They're used to using it as a recreational area. For some years, they've been using it as that. Now we want to try and stop taking it away from them, or do we take it away from them? That's it, Chair. Thank you. Did you get that, Chair?
Yeah, indeed. I think you've made your point on the Culver Centre pretty clear, to be honest. So well done for that. I'm sure your residents will be very pleased with that. Is Mr. Mayor there? Have you got a question, or is he? have we lost him? You there, Terry?
I'm still here.
Brilliant. Have you got a question, Terry?
No, I didn't have a question. No.
Brilliant. Councillor Redsill.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't actually going to bring it up till the end of the meeting, but Lynn's made a very good point about HMOs. I think it's something that this committee's got to look at. Because on the delegated list last week was 4 houses in the same road in Chadwell, and I've had one in mine, and there are lots more, and they're coming from a London firm to here. So I think in Chadwell it's 9 children in each house. And they're all
I don't think it's children. I think it's adults.
Over 16. Yeah.
Yeah.
16 and up, but they're not being looked after at night. They're being left to their own devices at night. That's the trouble. And that's the trouble we've had in my ward, where the children or young adults have been left. So I think it's something we've got to look at, Carol. We've got to bring this to the fore. Lynn is right. If we don't start to look at this, it's going to get worse, because it's you know, we're bringing young people who have perhaps done some wrong, and it's causing quite a bit of antisocial behaviour in the certain areas where they are. So I think we need to scrutinise this one. It needs to come through.
Okay, so would you like a report from the private housing service about actions to manage the council's additional licensing and mandatory licensing schemes for HMOs?
Definitely. Through the chair, Carol. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can ask Jalal to do that, and I'll come back to. I won't be able to tell you where we'll be able to have it, but certainly the private housing service do work with HMOs across the borough. They identify HMOs. They're the team for you to go to if you have concerns about HMOs in your ward. And they do take action against, serve notices on landlords, work with landlords to try to resolve issues, serve notices on landlords where landlords aren't cooperative. So yes, there is a private sector housing person dedicated to antisocial behaviour. So definitely, that if you're having problems in your ward, Councillor Redsill, that is definitely they're the team to go to.
Yeah, I've already been there, Carol. So I've already done that. So, but what I mean is, we need to get this before it happens, because what's happening, I think the one in Chadwell, the 4 homes are all in the same street and all 4-bedroom homes. So
yes.
Give people the chance to buy homes now, because they're being taken over by HMOs. So I think you're going to have, in that road, you're going to have 36 over 16s in that road, which is quite a lot, and traffic, because most of these youngsters, they may have a car, they may not. But I think it's going to be a bigger problem than we envisaged in the first place. So yeah, through the chair, I'd really like it brought to committee.
Okay, I will ask Jalal to put something together for you.
That's all right with you, Luke? Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. I was going to move on to the next piece, but I can just see there's one more here, so go for it, Lynn.
I just wanted to support Joy in bringing that forward, and I'm sure that you know, Carol's fully aware of the HMOs in Chadwell and the trouble that it's brought.
Yeah, only 2 aware. Yes.
Brilliant. So if we move on now, then the recommendations on this report are just to note the list of housing development sites, the removal of Emborn Green, and the completion of Alma Court. Do we have agreement for that?
Agreed.
Agreed. Brilliant. Thanks, guys. So now we move on to item 6, which is going to obviously of great importance. The Housing Service COVID-19 response update. So I believe this is Carol. So please go ahead, Carol.
It's a double act between me and Ben, really. So yes, this is an update report on the report that the committee received last time about the Housing Services response to COVID-19. We have, since the last committee, brought a number of services back into their normal way of being. So the primary one about that was the choice-based letting service, which resumed on the 11th of June. The private sector housing service has now started going out and doing proactive visits again, part 1 licence inspections, and HHSRS visits to find hazards in private sector housing. We have had a big rise, particularly in housing safeguarding referrals. There's been a big spike since lockdown restrictions have been relieved, so to speak, or released, and we have had 79 referrals in August to bring this report sort of bang up to date. Homelessness, I'm going to defer to Ben to tell you a bit more about that, but as you can see, there's a lot of information in the report. The Rents and Welfare team have been working incredibly hard throughout this period, and to bring this up to date, they actually exceeded their rent collection target for August. So the profile target was 91%, and they collected 91.9% of the rent in August. The council's rent arrears are higher than they've ever been, and we have had a 22% increase in people on universal credit since the pandemic, since the lockdown started. So that's an additional 504 families going onto universal credit since March. And that has had an impact on the amount of arrears, because obviously people have to wait 5 weeks for their first payment, and that can lead to them getting into all kinds of financial difficulties. So, but the team have been working extremely hard to work with people to get them to pay their rent. All of the repairs, so there were a total of 921 backlog repairs that were put on hold whilst we were on an emergency repairs only. I've got an up to date on that. There are 24 repairs now outstanding, and of those 23 have appointments. And the things that's been holding them up are, again, the same things as in here. It's plasterboard and wet trades and things like that. It's there's just national shortages in materials that are leading to some problems. The other thing that's the reason why some of them have not been completed yet is because the residents continue to be shielding and don't want the workers in their house to do the repairs. So everything else has continued. We are having we've been having a really big push on gas compliance. I don't actually have the up-to-date figure on that, but once the shielding period was paused, then we've made a real effort to talk to all those residents and get back into the houses where we couldn't get in before, and we hope to bring that back up to our normal performance. Sheltered housing has continued to work and call all the residents on an almost daily basis, and the latest thing they were trying to do was to work through all the halls to reopen the halls. However, the government has announced today that we will only be able to meet in groups of 6 people indoors, so we are reassessing the risk assessments that have been written for the reopening of halls in sheltered in light of that new law that will come in on Monday. We were already, it was very much focused, the previous risk assessment, on enforcing the 2-metre social distancing. And now we're going to have to reassess again on the basis that only 6 people are allowed to gather indoors. So that is something that we will be going back and looking at again on the basis of the government's new guidance. Tenancy and neighbourhood team, the tenancy management team have restarted tenancy audits and proactive visits, and the neighbourhood team have been out the whole time. They've been going out and identifying things and making reports. Something else went through my head then, it's completely gone now. Obviously the caretakers have continued their work all the way through this programme, and resident engagement have gone back to doing some of their pop-ups at a kind of socially distanced way. And as you can see from Lynn being on this call on Teams this evening, we have been trying to get equipment rolled out to the members of the Excellence Panel so that we can have Excellence Panel on Teams, and that we can, because not all the members had the ability or the equipment needed or the digital skills to engage in a digital way. So we have now got a programme of getting the actual equipment out to them, and Connie from the resident engagement team is going out and training people on how to use it. and it seems to be working well so far. Lynn's like the guinea pig for this, so but it seems to have worked.
Well, it has.
So yeah, so we're looking at different ways of doing resident engagement, but we clearly will not at any time soon be going back to having meetings in the way that we used to. So we will, unfortunately, Councillor Redsell, I know you won't like this, be having to do a lot more kind of digital engagement with people, because we simply can't have meetings. It's just not possible. It wasn't possible really with the 2 metre distancing, and it's definitely not possible now with the only 6 people in a room. So we are thinking about different ways that we can do resident engagement in the future. Our transforming homes contractors continue to be on site. We've talked about new build housing already. There have been, the pandemic really did impact on Claudian Way, and the handovers of those properties, as Keith outlined earlier, has been quite severely delayed by a number of different things. So we are hoping to, we've had 5 handed over this week, and the rest of the handovers, as it says in here, will be in sort of this month and next month. We hope that they will all be finished, I would hope, by the middle of next month. So that's that. Ben, did you want to say anything about homelessness and everyone in programme before we get questions from the members? Ben is the new strategic lead for Housing Solutions. He replaced Loretta Johnson. She left the council some time ago. Ben, over to you.
I understand members have had Ryan's report. I won't read through it all, but just some of the highlights within that relating to homelessness. On my birthday, 26th of March 2020, obviously government gave guidance to bring everyone in. We housed 48 households comprising 46 single people and 2 couples who were either known rough sleepers or believed to be at risk of rough sleeping. We provided temporary accommodation, 23 units within borough, 25 people housed outside of the borough in surrounding areas. Working with local voluntary organisations, we were able to provide food and supplies throughout March, April, May and June, reducing that service in July and August. Everyone who came in through that programme was assessed jointly by my senior mental health practitioner and my rough sleeper coordinator, so everyone had support plans. We were really keen to try and make these temporary placements into a long-term meaningful change for the individuals concerned. There were very high support needs. Every single one of them was identified as having either a mental health issue or a substance misuse issue or both. We've worked very closely with MHCLG to put together a plan for this cohort and think about what the future holds for them, transitioning them into sort of something more permanent. At the time of writing the report, we'd had 15 households move on from temporary accommodation. 6 of those households have been assisted to find PRS accommodation with support attached. That's numbers now 12, with 3 more in the pipeline. 2 people have been moved into supported accommodation through Thurrock Mind. We had 9 households where they'd moved on for other reasons. We are taking a proactive approach to this cohort, trying to build really positive relations, trying to understand each of them individually. We've worked with a really high number of private sector organisations, voluntary sector organisations in each of the boroughs, and particularly in Thurrock with Inclusions Thurrock have been incredibly helpful, and with our support provider St Mungo's throughout that period. The number of households approaching us through the Housing Solutions service is down by about 20%, as you'd expect through the government's moratorium around evictions. While we can see that's due to be lifted on the 20th of September, the majority of people being evicted, it would be a Section 21 notice served to someone on a short hold tenancy, and the government's indicated they would need to give, landlords would need to give 6 months notice now rather than the usual 2 months notice. So that has certainly brought some relief. A lot of households, though, continues to be relationship breakdown, family relationship breakdown that leads to them approaching us, and there continue to be illegal evictions. We've created a number of new roles within the team. We had a restructure of the service, so we've now got a tenant and landlord liaison officer who aims to intervene when people are being evicted, work with the landlord to keep people in their accommodation, work proactively in that way, building relationships with a number of the local providers and lettings agencies. We've got a tenancy sustainment officer and a community and employment officer, because we know that pathways into training and employment are realistically the way for a lot of these guys to get out of the situation they're in. And we have a specialist private lettings officer working exclusively with the rough sleeper cohort. So that's a sort of summary. Happy to take any questions.
I know there'll be a lot of questions on this. I'll start just with Carol, if I may. The rent arrears,
Yes.
the extra rent arrears. What are the rent arrears now compared to the same period last year? Can you give us a ballpark figure about how much higher they are? Like across
I haven't got my emails open, but I can email you the exact figures on Councillor Spillman. But they are about £2 million now. I can't tell you for certain what they were last year, but that's probably at least £500,000 more than they were at this time last year. They are a lot higher than they've ever been. This is the highest arrears have ever been. And obviously I should have said, and I forgot to say earlier, we don't know what the future holds, and we are particularly wary of the end of the furlough period and further impacts that may have on employment in the borough, and in particular impacts that may have on people who work in the areas that have been most affected so far: retail, casual dining, travel, tourism, all those areas. And obviously with Lakeside being in the borough and a number of the organisations that make up the people who are at the businesses that are in Lakeside already in difficulty. Pizza Hut announcing today it was closing a number of restaurants after Pizza Express said that 2 days ago. So, you know, I think the bottom's definitely fallen out of the pizza market for sure. But that's going to keep on happening, I think. And when in October, I think it's going to be really, we don't know what's going to come. We're part of Housemark, the benchmarking organisation, and they've been doing monthly reports during COVID, and they've been doing sort of predictive analysis of what might happen. And they show it rising quite sharply, that arrears would rise quite sharply from October, the end of October, when the furlough ends, through November, December and January, and then maybe start to come back down later on next year. But we just don't know. We also don't know what will happen if there's a proper second wave of COVID. So there's a number of unknowns about the future, but all I can say is that up until this point, the Rents and Welfare team have worked incredibly hard, identifying cases, keeping in contact with people, referring people to support, be that through our own financial inclusion officers or other organisations. So we are committed to working as hard as we can with our residents to prevent people from getting into arrears.
Thank you very much. For Ben, these 9 households that moved on from temporary accommodation on their own accord, can you tell me whether the council is still in touch and still providing any services to these guys?
Sure. I mean, a number of the people were released from prison and came to us. Sadly, in 3 cases, they reoffended and went back to prison, so that was their reason for moving on. One was reunited with family who took them back in. 2 found their own PRS accommodation through friends, and yet in all 3 cases we're still in touch to make sure that the support plans we've put in place aren't really just simply attached to the accommodation. It's all about preventing them coming back to us when street homeless. One of them moved on to a neighbouring authority, it was Thurrock local authority, but St Mungo's continued to offer the support, went from here because they also work in Thurrock, so we're still supporting that individual, and Thurrock housed them. There were 2 people where they rejected the accommodation almost instantly and went away. One of them has re-engaged this week actually, and we're meeting with him tomorrow. There's only one of them we don't know the whereabouts.
Brilliant, thanks. I mean, I think like credit for for local authorities across the country actually for the efforts on housing rough sleepers during this period. The numbers speak for themselves across the authorities. It really has shown the art of the possible. When you know, and I know it was certain circumstances that caused it, but it really did show what can be done with a concerted effort on this problem. On a wider point around homelessness, one of my frustrations has been that I just don't think that the department has engaged, and I mean this historically, has not engaged with third sector suppliers of housing. We haven't got enough housing associations. We haven't got enough non-for-profit management companies that are managing a portfolio of properties. We've not built up, and obviously not built up enough relationships with enough privately rented landlords, some private landlords. Now I know that Thurrock is a special case because of our proximity to London, so I know that makes that especially difficult. But what plans have you got in the pipeline to try and address this problem? Because, you know, we've got, I mean, I know that I can see the numbers. It's basically 50% of the people we've picked up through the homelessness have ended up being placed out of borough. And I don't know how many at the moment. It'd be interesting for you to tell us, you know, what sort of percentage of just general referrals are still being placed out of borough. But we've got to. I know Lynn spoke about it earlier as well. It is a big concern that we're housing so many people out of borough. So I just want to know what plans have we got to deal with this very difficult issue.
Okay, if I break that up into several different bits. So I think Keith is still on the line. I can still see his initials down there. So Keith's team are responsible for our relationships with housing associations, and they do work hard to maintain them. I don't really know what the history is and why there are so few housing associations developing in this borough. But I can tell you that we are continuing to develop and build relationships. This morning we had a meeting with Legal & General, their affordable housing arm, to talk about how we can work with them. So we've been trying to develop relationship with new players in the market. They already have some housing in the borough at the Lakeside, some shared ownership housing. So we are trying to work hard. We did have, when you could have meetings, a housing association forum where we'd get housing associations together. So it's, I guess I'd say, I feel like saying it's not for want of trying, but Keith, I don't know if you have a more nuanced perspective than that, or you certainly have a better informed perspective than that.
Okay, I mean, I thought all I can really add is because we do try very hard to engage with housing associations because we realise we can't do everything ourselves. One of the problems I think historically in relation to housing association development in Thurrock is that, I think you have alluded to it, is that the sales values and the prices, the values of homes constructed in the borough are much lower than they are in further into London. Yet we're competing for the same construction companies that work in London, so they commute past their boroughs into London, and so we have high London construction prices, lower levels of house values and rents, which makes the whole feasibility mix very, very challenging. I think historically that's part of the reason why housing associations haven't been as active as we would like to be. So, and there are areas of activity, and we meet regularly with them, both on sort of general leads matters, but also encouraging the provision of supported housing. But it is a tough ask. But we are continuing to do that, and we do want a greater activity of a range of different housing providers, including housing associations in the borough.
We are also developing currently, it's in the very early stages of development, a joint project between children's housing and adults to try to commission more supported housing, particularly looking at the kind of clients that we've seen coming through, everyone in with mental health problems and or substance misuse, dual diagnosis, those kinds of things. So we're working together to try and develop some supported housing, but like I say, it's a very early stage. It's only had its first kick-off meeting this week, so it's very early. So we are trying to work together across the organisation with partners outside the organisation. Ben, did you want to say something about building relationships with private sector landlords?
Absolutely. Just on that rough sleeper cohort, it is 50% that had to be housed outside the borough, but respect, this was emergency accommodation. It's not where we're trying to achieve their long-term accommodation, and that's true of all people placed in TA. It's what's available that day, because we're legally obligated to put them up then and there. And we are trying to use neighbouring authorities. We're not placing them a long way away. 15 in Southend, 6 in Havering, 3 in Brentwood, and 1 in Basildon. As I say, we've got established relationships with support agencies in all of those areas and kept in regular touch with them. It is difficult placing in Thurrock. We are competing with neighbouring authorities, with London authorities. And what we've realised recently is that when we've incentivised landlords beyond the usual first month's rent and deposit, but offered an incentive of £500 on top of that, or access to an insurance scheme. As you'll see, we've put 9 rough sleepers in the last 2 weeks, whereas before that we'd only got 6 in the several months up to that. So it can be about needing to match the offers others are making, rather than not having decent relationships. It's not that they're not willing to house our cohort at all. When we do match the offer, they are putting them up. So that was part of it. And obviously for the rough sleeper cohort, we were able to access additional funds, and that's why we've had such success there.
Brilliant. Did you have anything else to add, Karen?
No, I was just trying to remember all the other groups that you mentioned in your question, but it was a while ago now, so I've forgotten them all. But do you feel like we've answered your question?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I'm sure I'll come up with many more though.
We do
just writing down a note so I remember to do one of the other things you asked for. So
I'm really chuffed that we got 2 people into Thurrock Mind, and we've got another on the waiting list who's been accepted as suitable from the rough sleeper cohort. So we are trying to establish relationships locally, and as you say, maybe historically that's not always been successful, but it's something we're really focused on at the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, and welcome, Ben, as well. Councillor Worrell.
Sorry, Chair. I think Councillor Abbas might have put his hand up first before Councillor Worrell.
Oh, fair enough. I can't keep a
No,
track.
it's fine, even
Some people are putting the digital hand up. Some people are putting the real hand
I couldn't find this option. I don't know, for some reason. That's why I was raising my hand.
Councillor Abbas, if Councillor Worrell doesn't mind.
Thank you. I have actually a few questions. If you allow me, then I can ask all these, and then the relevant officers can answer. My first concerns, they are on repairs. Even though your officers have replied me on a particular resident, but overall, I think these contractors, they really are not really kind of doing their jobs properly, because we have in the past an incident. I can't remember either it was this year or last year, where I think Councillor Worrell highlighted some resident where she was charged very high amount, and then when it was reported through councillor, it was reduced. The same, I think, incident is happening again and again. One of my residents, she was not really, even her calls were not really taken very professionally. She was given time again and again, even though you have answered me privately in email, your officers. But I just want to kind of reassurance from you, these contractors, they are doing their job properly, and they are treating our residents with utmost respect. So my concerns are on this. So I just want to ask a question on these 919 repairs, even though you have mentioned like the majority of which have been completed or booked for completion. So how satisfied you are like these will be completed or done to the highest standard? So my second question is on homelessness. I think it's really, I appreciate Ben's work on these and yours work on these homeless, especially during this period. And I think, I don't know if it was in the last meeting or before this, you did mention like how many people they have been accommodated. And out of those people, if I can remember correctly, I think you did mention last time there were 2 residents, they had some visa issues. So
no recourse to public funds, yes.
Public funds, something, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know what is going to happen to them. Either they are still being offered accommodation, or have they been referred to someone where they can be accommodated properly. And on this, at the same time, obviously, you and your officers there, you have done amazing work on this homelessness during this period. But obviously, at the same time, there are kind of the code, these new legislation, where you can issue eviction orders, and you can foil these kind of things. Obviously, circumstances are different. We need to keep this balance. We need income, and at the same time, we need to make sure our residents, they are not being unnecessarily evicted, because of their financial circumstances. And on the last question, it's not really a question, it's just a suggestion on page 36, fourth paragraph. You have mentioned financial year over 370 customers. I don't know what you mean, customers or residents. I think if they are residents, they should be treated as residents rather than customers, because we are not business, we are a local authority, providing services to them. Thank you.
Okay, so on the repairs service, we have quite a rigorous contract management set up with Hmos, who are our main responsive repairs contractors. And this report relates mainly these 921 backlog repairs are with Hmos. And so we go through every core group meeting. We have a core group meeting every month, and at every core group meeting, we go through a full suite of performance indicators, looking at resident satisfaction, which includes, there's a question about the politeness and the helpfulness of the staff. We go through the complaints that have been received and upheld. We go through finished right first time, whether appointments were made and kept. We go through all of that every month. Their performance is, I have to say, very good. So I realise there are specific cases that members pick up, and there are specific complaints that residents make. In all housing services, the service that gets the most complaints is always the repairs service, because it is the highest volume service. We do tens of thousands of repairs every year. And I can tell you, we had some information today at our management team. Repairs, upheld complaints have fallen quite dramatically since this time last year. So we do interrogate them on the data. We do interrogate them on the satisfaction. We do interrogate them on the feedback we get from residents. And as you will know, Councillor Abbas, from the complaint response that you got, where mistakes are made, and we're all humans and nobody's perfect, and so every now and then somebody will make a mistake. That is picked up from those complaints, and we have what are called learning outcome reports or something like that. And they also, that I don't go to, so I go to the core group and I go to the partnership board, which happens every 6 months. Underneath me there's an operational group, and there's also like a specific customer care meetings that take place. And these learning outcomes are discussed there. So, for example, the person on the telephone will be spoken to say, because all the calls are recorded, so they can be listened to, and then they'll say, well, you didn't deal with this very well, you should have dealt with it like that. Or toolbox talks would be given to the operatives. So one thing that happens on a reasonably regular basis is that operative will close a job down when there's a follow-up that's needed. So the resident will get a call saying, I hear your report, your repair's been finished. How did that go? And they say, well, my repair hasn't been finished. What are you talking about? So there's a whole thing about operative training. This is how you raise a follow-on. This is about this. This is how you do that. It's a whole thing about that, which they do regularly, and they're picking up on things all the time. The branch manager will call people who have complained or have raised concerns in the resident feedback and speak to them about what their experience was, so he can really understand where things went wrong for them. A lot of the time what happens comes down to poor communication, and so we do spend quite a bit of time talking about how they can improve communication between the branch and the residents. So I can assure you, Councillor, that we are very hard on them, but their performance is actually really good on all the stats. They're not even amber on any of their stats. They're green on everything. Answering calls in the call centre, dealing with complaints, all the satisfaction measures. Resident feedback is very positive on those satisfaction and perceptions of their service. So we are talking about things that are happening more at the margins than any kind of systemic problems. They have dealt very well, I think, with this period. There have been quite a lot of intersecting issues. Obviously, some of their staff are on furlough. They weren't able to get into people's houses because they were shielding. There's a national shortage of some materials at the moment. So there are a number of different things which have held some of these repairs up. I can't tell you, I mean, as I say, at the moment, 23 of them have appointments and there's only one repair that doesn't have an appointment. So I would expect that by the end of this month, everything will have been done with the possible exception of that one repair that doesn't have an appointment yet. So we are absolutely focused on them learning from complaints, learning from inquiries, learning from all the experience, all the feedback that we get, we use for them to learn and improve their service to residents. And the branch manager is very committed to that as well. As I'm sure Lynn Mansfield will also attest, because he does go to the excellence panel quite regularly and talk about things. So that was your first question. Your second question was about homelessness. Your third point was about, what was your third? Your fourth point was about the use of the word customers. It's a long debate in all housing organisations that I've ever worked in, housing associations and local authorities, about whether you use the word residents, tenants, customers. You know, everybody uses different words, but if you would prefer we use the word residents, then I'm happy to go back and ask for the word residents to be used, because that's my preferred word as well. What was your third point? Because I seem to have forgotten that in all the other things that you said. So the repairs, I'll get Ben to answer on the homelessness. I've done the fourth one. What was the third one again?
It was about the
evictions.
Yeah.
Evictions. Okay, so nobody can be evicted. No cases can go back to court until the 20th of September. As Ben has said, anybody who receives a notice of seeking possession after the 20th of September has to have a 6-month notice. We've hardly served any notices since the lockdown period started. And the advice that the Department of Justice brought out when they brought out their announcement about the resumption of the ability to evict people was that if we want to take rent arrears cases, we should really be focusing on people who haven't paid anything for a year. So it's very much focused then on the won't pays rather than the can't pays. All landlords, whether they're private sector landlords or public sector landlords, will be interrogated by judges in the courts as to what support has been given to people if their arrears arise solely because of things to do with the pandemic. So if they've been on furlough or they lost their job or they were self-employed and they couldn't get any work, etc., etc., all the sort of pandemic related aspects and consequences that may have led to rent arrears, judges will be interrogating that and saying, well, what did you do to help? Did you come to an agreement with this tenant? Did you help them? What ways did you support them and help them during this pandemic period where they were particularly affected? So the advice is from, well, not the sort of, I don't know if it is guidance, I guess is the right word. The guidance from the Department of Justice is to focus on those tenants who have not paid any rent for a whole year or as close to, because then they won't have been affected by the pandemic because their non-payment has been going on for much longer. So, and we don't have very many cases like that at all. So yeah, so we're not planning on taking eviction action. The courts, again, that advice note from the Department of Justice was saying it would focus very much on the most serious cases first. So serious cases of antisocial behaviour, serious cases involving domestic abuse, and very long-standing serious cases of rent arrears. But there'll be some cases that were in the system anyway, not so many of ours, but there'll be quite lots of cases that are in the system anyway. But I don't anticipate a lot of them actually getting through the courts because the courts have got a backlog.
Yeah, I think just to make sure that, because I'm interested in saying that Councillor Abbas has mentioned, and it's about no recourse to public funds.
Yeah, that's the bit that Ben's going to answer.
Excellent.
That's the bit that Ben's going to answer.
What are we doing in those circumstances then?
Ben, over to you.
Obviously, under everyone in, there was no distinction there. I've got recorded actually 2 EEA nationals and 1 no recourse to public funds. With that individual, we've worked closely with them. We've now got them a passport, which was part of the reason they weren't eligible for funds. I don't know the case inside out, but that was a hugely positive development. I know Councillor Abbas was asking about the support provided and things that lead to tenancy breakdown. I did list some of the new roles in the restructure that we've got. Some of those are specific to the rough sleeper cohort, but some of them are funded by Thurrock. So the landlord and tenant liaison officer, very much about early intervention and prevention, identifying those individuals or families with rent arrears and working with them at a very early stage. We've got the tenancy sustainment officer role about making these placements stick. We don't want to see them break down and those people come through in a sort of circular fashion. We've got the employment and support officer, because very much long term, that's where we see long-term sustainable change, particularly if we can achieve 15 hours of work for individuals. Yeah, forgive me, I forget whether there was any more, Councillor Abbas, because it was some time ago you asked the homelessness questions, but that's what I noted down.
Councillor Abbas, has that answered your point?
Slightly, I was just kind of concerned, like what whether this one individual, is he being continually accommodated, or is he still with us, or what?
We're continuing to accommodate, yes. When a person has no recourse to public funds and they're not employed, then landlords can't give them a permanent place. They can't have a tenancy. They can't. It's illegal. We are allowed to accommodate them under everyone in temporary accommodation. So that's what we've done. But given that this person now has a passport, presumably a British or EU passport, then that will enable them then to move on and get permanently. I assume that will enable them to move on and get permanently housed. Although I have to say, immigration law is not something I'm particularly expert at.
I know from my own experience, I'm very happy to hear that, because I know that sometimes, and I think I've mentioned it in a council forum actually before, that if you've got all these different issues regarding benefits and debt and housing and family problems, and the nub of the problem was the immigration status, and a case probably being held in the Home Office that just needs someone to look at it and press a button. And it is good that, and you can solve all the problems, nearly all of them, just by getting that civil servant to press a button. So I'm really pleased to see council officers realising that, getting them the right support, and not just going, oh, I don't like immigration, sounds a bit complicated, I don't want to go near that, yeah, because that is often the best way to get all these problems sorted. I'm a bit conscious of time, so I'm going to spin round the group, and then hopefully we'll have a chance at the end of this for anyone else who's got an extra question. And I know Wendy's not there to poke me in the ribs anymore when I'm running too late.
Councillor Worrell is the next one.
Is Councillor Worrell? I think Councillor Worrell's already had a question, hasn't she? So
no, she didn't, because Councillor Abbas
didn't get one.
Oh, I do apologise.
Don't try and cut me out. I've not even said anything yet.
Councillor Worrell.
Right. Shall I ask my questions all together, or do you want them one at a time?
Given my performance with Councillor Abbas's questions, you might want to ask them one at a time, so I don't forget them halfway through.
Okay, so I've only got 3, I think, Luke. So, but they are in different service areas. So, Carol, I was reading today. So we've got in this report that we had 50 that we've housed as part of bringing them in as the homelessness.
Yeah, 49, 48.
Yeah, but in the cabinet report next week it says 32. Why is there a difference?
Which cabinet report next week?
Right, the cabinet
report for cabinet next week.
Oh, was that last month then? Was there a COVID? It says 32 people were identified, and that's
that was in our last update report. I think that might be where that's come from. I think if you look at the one we did into this committee in June, I think it said 32. Because it was 32 at that point, and we've taken some more people in who were threatened with homelessness.
Oh, okay, then. So it's definitely 50. We've got 50. Yeah. Okay,
these numbers are the up-to-date numbers.
Okay, then, lovely. What's the financial impact been, Carol, of this to us? You know, and is it all covered by the money that the government's given us? You know, or are we, you know, shouldering some of this from, you know, our own budget?
The cost of this, which I think may be in the next finance report that goes to cabinet, because I know that the information's been put together. I'm not quite sure how it's going to be presented in that report. The cost, we did a sort of like overall cost, which was if everybody who we had put up threw everyone in stayed in temporary accommodation until the end of the year, which obviously, as Ben has outlined, is not what's happening. We are getting people into permanent accommodation. Our estimate was that that would cost us about £800,000 for the whole year.
Right.
The council is charging all these things to a specific COVID code. I'm not sure how much of that will be covered by, obviously the government has given 2 tranches of money out to local authorities. And off the top of my head, I can't remember how much we got out of that as a council. But yes, all these costs are being shown as part of that, the COVID cost, so to speak, for the council.
Right, okay then. So yeah, Carol, there's definitely a cabinet meeting next week, the 16th of September.
There might well be, yes.
And on page 179, if you want to just have a little look at it, I know you can't do that now, but before it goes, because we can only have like one lot of figures, it says with regards to COVID-19 impact, 32 people were identified as rough sleepers and have been housed at a cost of about £70 a day. You know, so it's definitely, we've got one lot of figures in this report and a different lot going to cabinet next week. So, you know.
And which cabinet report is that? Who's the author of that report?
It's the big finance report, you know, the one that
Sean Clarke's report. Sean Clarke's report.
I just screenshot the pages, the one that deals with, you know, the whole of the report.
So which page was it again? Page 172, did you say?
179.
179.
And
I'll have a look.
Yeah, and that's definitely what it says, Carol. You know, it's all about the housing stuff. It's all the housing. It talks about the general fund, you know, and the impacts of the general fund, and that COVID's had over £1 million impact on the general fund, housing general fund. Is that right?
I'd have to, like I say, our estimate from the everyone in aspect is about £800,000.
Right.
So, and what they might be including in there is also the loss of income to the private sector housing service. So the private sector housing service is also a general funded service, and they have an income target to meet every year through licensing and enforcement and fines and things like that, community protection notices. And they obviously were not able to do anything for 5 or 6 months because of the pandemic and the lockdown. So they are down on their income collection.
Right. And what's the impact of rents, Carol, been, you know, to the fine? This is all like the fine. This is my questions all in one, really. I think everything that I wanted to talk about was, you know, COVID's a big impact on us. What is the real impact to the HRA and the Housing General Fund of COVID, and what is it going to be doing to us, you know, going forward as a housing committee?
The impact to the housing revenue account, as I say, so far has been reasonably well mitigated by continuing to collect the rent. So as I said earlier, the council is above its profile target for rent collection in August. So we are doing very well in terms of collecting the rent. But at the same time, the rent arrears are higher than they've ever been, which is kind of a slightly conundrum-y kind of thing. However, as I said in answer to, I think it was Councillor Spillman earlier, we don't know what's going to happen, and we remain vigilant and working with people. And our message to all of our residents is we're there to help. Tell us at the earliest possible opportunity if you lose your job, if your income's affected, then please let us know. We can work with you to ensure that you're able to pay your rent. So that's the message we've been sending out in our housing newsletters, not just about the housing service, but about the council tax and those sorts of things. So we've been making that point consistently to our residents. If the more people who go, this is not just for us, but for all housing organisations, the more people who go onto universal credit, then the more rent arrears you get because of that 5-week lapse. It's the same everywhere. I'm on the board of a housing association, and it's exactly the same for them. So about 68% of our arrears come from people who are on universal credit, and that's reasonably consistent across the piece. Anybody who loses their job now is most likely to go onto universal credit. So the more people go onto universal credit, the more of an impact it has. So that's just a fact of the way the benefit system works. But I think in the housing revenue account, we are doing as well as we can, really. The rents and welfare team have done an amazing job, and they continue to work really hard with our residents to ensure that they don't get into arrears, because actually it's not, whilst I'm talking about it as if it's all about our income collection and we've collected 91.99% of our profile budget, actually it's about preventing people from getting into arrears, because getting into arrears makes it really difficult for them to do a whole host of things. And it makes it really difficult for them ever to get out of arrears. Once you get above a certain level, it's really hard to come back from that. So we want to work with people so they don't get into that situation in the first place, so that they can continue to have the lowest level of debt possible.
So we're not going to get to a place, Carol, you don't envisage that when it comes to, you know, plugging the gap in the budget, that we're going to say that we're going to have big cuts across the housing department?
At this point in time, that is not what I am envisaging, no.
Okay.
And obviously the council, as you I'm sure you know, Councillor Worrell, the housing revenue account is a statutorily ring-fenced account.
Yeah, absolutely.
And cannot be used to prop up the general fund. The housing general fund, obviously the general fund, as I'm sure Sean Clark's report to Cabinet next week outlines, is suffering more problems, because the general fund, the housing revenue account is supported by rents and service charges, and the general fund is supported by council tax and government grants and things. Government grants have been going down anyway, and council tax payment has been very badly affected by the pandemic.
Luke, can you just indulge me one question that's really important to residents across the borough in sheltered accommodation? So you talked about this earlier about today's announcement, Carol.
Yeah.
But, you know, for the last couple of months, and I've been sending them on to officers, and we're being contacted as councillors. It's really affecting our residents now, not having access to those halls. So, and even if they have to book in like pods of 6, I think that, you know, I don't want to see them kept closed, because they are, you know, these are some of the vulnerable people. These people move in there so that they were lonely in their houses, and they move in so they can have company, and now they haven't. And also, I had a resident ask me to raise with the council that they pay a service charge for the hall, and for the last 6 months they've paid a service charge for something that they've not had. And when service charges were brought in, it was under the precept that Councillor Gledhill brought them in, that you pay for the service that you receive. And for 6 months they've not received this service, and for 6 months those that do pay full rent are paid. So I just wondered if there's anything we can look at there, you know, because if it could well be a year before they can use it, and they're paid a year for a service that they really haven't had.
Okay, so there's 2 points there. The sheltered housing service have been going around all the halls, as I said, marking out the 2 metres distance, and making sure that they were all ready to, you know, try and getting all the cleaning supplies that they need. And they are looking into a booking system, yes. So they've been doing all of that, working around all of the complexes and all of the halls, including Doug Siddons, where the hall's being refurbished at the moment. And they've been doing all that work, hand sanitizers on the walls and wipes for this, that and the other, ordering all sorts of supplies, going around taping off chairs and tables and making sure everything's 2 metres apart. Only for today, the government to announce this 6 people thing. So as I said, we've done a risk assessment. We've been working and changing everything so it's aligned with that risk assessment. Now we're going to have to review that risk assessment and see how we can make it align with the new rules. I'm not saying we're not going to open them, but we will have to open them on the understanding that it is the law that no more than 6 people can meet in there. That will be the law from Monday.
For a booking system,
we are looking at we are investigating a booking system. We talked about it only today, so that is they have been working very hard to get all the things in place.
I'm not saying they haven't, Carol. I'm not saying that at all, but they know that 3 weeks ago their chairs all got taped. You've got to sit here, you've got to sit there, and that was 3 weeks ago. And this not, and I think that mental health problems are kicking in, not with just young people, but with our older people who are feeling very, very segregated.
Absolutely, and that's why we have had the daily calls to all the people who wanted them throughout this program. That still continues now. On your second point, residents in sheltered housing do not pay the service charge for the halls. They pay the service charge for the whole sheltered housing service. The halls are one element of that, but they are not the whole of it. So even if the halls were to stay closed for the whole year, that's only a small element of what people in sheltered housing are paying their service charge for. The bulk of it is to pay for the sheltered housing officers who are there for them. And as I say, have been making calls nearly every day to a lot of the residents in sheltered housing, and everybody has been contacted at least once a week. So
I shall feed that back tomorrow, Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is that all your questions, Councillor Worrell?
That is pretty much, unless something comes up with something anybody else asks.
Well, I can see.
Oh, Carol, can I just ask, do we pay for all of the CCTV out of the HRA? Because we've got a bit in here on the CCTV. Is that out of
We do pay for the bulk of the CCTV service through the HRA, because the bulk of the CCTV service is provided to HRA land and buildings.
All right then, thank you.
Councillor Redsill.
Thank you, Chair. It's all right. I thought I wasn't here for a minute. I've got just a lot of my questions have been answered through the thing, so I've only got 3 short questions. I just wanted to give praise where praise is due. Obviously, Ben hasn't been in the job very long, but he seems to me to have done a great job. So I'd like to sort of say to Carol and the team, and I know we've been in talks many times, and I'd like to give praise because we're in a very unusual position. I think housing has done really, really well. So apart from that, I've just got 3 questions. One I think is for Keith, if he's still around.
Looks like he is, yes.
Yeah, okay. Just that we're using a lot of housing associations. Are we still in contact with Family Mosaic? Because we used to use them a lot in the borough, and I haven't heard their name before. The other question is to Ben. Have we got any ex-servicemen still homeless? And the other question was what Lynn just asked earlier on about CCTV. Have we any CCTV that we can still put up elsewhere?
Okay, Keith.
I've got the easy question there, in that Family Mosaic were actually subsumed within Peabody a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So that's possibly why you've not heard their name at all. Then okay. You may now hear them referred to as Peabody. From a development aspect, we do still have contact with them, but they have largely decided that Thurrock wasn't an area that they would particularly wish to develop, and focusing more on central London boroughs. So we have less activity from Thurrock from Peabody and Family Mosaic as well.
All right, thanks, Keith.
Okay, Ben, on the ex-serviceman point.
Sure. Not amongst the cohort we talked about today. There are currently 8 rough sleepers in Thurrock that we're in the process of assessing, so I couldn't speak to them yet, but when that report comes in, obviously that's something we look out for.
Okay, if that's something you could get back to me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Certainly. And what was your third one again, Councillor Redsill, sorry?
CCTV, if there's any available.
I wouldn't say we've got, I mean, the system does, there are some mobile CCTV cameras available in the council, but they're usually deployed. We are bidding for more CCTV in different areas. So I know through the Towns Fund for Grays, they're considering putting in a bid for more CCTV for Grays Town Centre. So it is possible to expand the network and to put more cameras in. But there will come a point where we've kind of reached full capacity.
Okay, that's something I'll talk to you out of this meeting then, Carol. Thank you.
Okay, no worries.
Cheers.
Thank you very much for your kind words at the beginning there, Councillor Redsill. And whilst Ben has done a fabulous job in the time that he's been here, I would say he's very much building on the building blocks that Loretta left in place. So Loretta put the restructure together, and all of that was already there before Ben arrived, and that restructure is very much focused around prevention, as Ben has outlined, and continuing to support people so they don't get into a sort of revolving door of homelessness kind of situation.
Brilliant. Thanks, Carol.
Of the councillors that I can't see on my screen for some reason, and Lynn Mansfield, has anyone got any questions? Has anyone who hasn't spoken yet got any questions that they want to ask?
Councillor Piccolo's shaking his head. Lynn Mansfield, I can see you on my screen. Do you want to ask any questions?
Can you? Because all I've got on my screen is Councillor Abbas now. I've got nobody else here. I don't know what I've done, if I've done something or not, but
he's the
no,
best
I've just got
one
Councillor
anyway,
Abbas on the
so
whole
you're
of the
okay
screen
there.
now. But no, there isn't a question. But as Joyce said, that credit where credit's due, the sheltered housing people have been really, really good. I commented on the calls last time, or the time before, and since then they have picked up and they've been really, really good with us completely. And going right back to Mears, I agree with you, Carol. We've all got little complaints about separate things, but they do so much, and they are really, really good. Really good.
Yeah. Thank you, Lynn. Right, I've exhausted all the people I can see on my screen now, Councillor Spillman as well. So,
Councillor Baker, have you got anything to say? Got any questions?
No, thanks, Chair. I think down the line, really, people have done well. I do agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker.
Brilliant. So let me just go to the recommendations here.
I think it's probably just a
note. Yeah, no doubt.
Note it.
So yeah, we've been asked to note the report. Is everyone agreed?
Agreed.
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 Good stuff. So we'll move on to the final item on the agenda.
The one that I know you've all been waiting for.
We've all been waiting
so
for
this is
why we come.
This is your regular annual garage product update. So the introduction and background is what a lot of you will be aware of. There has been a lot of progress. I would draw members' attention in particular to the charts on page 45. I'm not sure if you can see them if I hold them up. No, because the blurry thing's just going to blur them. So 4.4 and 4.5, looking at the very much larger amount of garage lets that we've done in 2019-20, and already in 2021 we've let as many as we in this period, even during the lockdown, as we let in the whole of 2017-18. So the work of the garage project manager, and she's had a garage officer as well for some of this period, has really helped in terms of really pushing us on with lettings in the last year. She's also, through her sterling work, identified a number of void garages that weren't being held as such, and also really looked at garage rent arrears. So people are not supposed to have rent arrears on their garage tenancies. If they're a council tenant with rent arrears, then we expect them to prioritise the rent for their home over the rent for their garage. And if they are not a council tenant and they have a garage, then they shouldn't be getting into rent arrears. So she has been ending a number of those garage tenancies as people have got into rent arrears. And that's something that wasn't really happening before, as you can see from the large spike in voids last year. But as you can see, there's only been 48 so far this year. So that she's kind of done a lot of work on that in the last financial year. And that's really bearing fruit and has enabled us obviously to do 338 lettings in the last financial year and 108 already in this financial year. We are continuing to work on the back office processes. That hasn't gone as quickly as I would have liked, but a lot of the work has been focusing on clearing garages, getting them let, really focusing on that period. We did have a whole project where we got all the, as it says in 3.3, we had 800 hard copy garage applications, and they're all now on the system. We're no longer taking hard copy applications. People apply online, and the waiting list has reduced from 1,600 applicants to just under 1,000. So there's a lot of work that has gone on in the background as well. We are working, as it says in 3.7, on this pioneering husk project. The pilot project at Defoe Parade has received planning permission from the planning committee, and so we will have a two disabled adapted 2-bed properties. And we're hoping that we're looking forward to doing this on a number of other sites across the borough, because we do, as the committee will know, we've talked about this before, have a number of not very nice garage sites across the borough. And personally, as your assistant director for housing, I'm much more interested in providing housing for people than I am in providing housing for cars. So my priority is to think about how we can develop more housing like this for people who need. So these are all bungalows. Everybody loves a bungalow, and they make use of the walls, the existing walls for the garage, the existing slab for the garage, and there's a modular solution that's sort of craned in and tied back to the walls and tied to the slab. So it's a really interesting project. I was sent some pictures today actually of some completed ones that look really, really good. So we are hoping to do much more of that. And then, as you can see there, we've been doing a lot of recycling and reusing, working to up the council's recycling numbers solely through this project. We've made a lot of progress. There's still a long way to go. I think I say that I think this is the third one of these that I've done, and I say that every time. But I really do feel like this report demonstrates the amount of progress that we have made, and there's definitely forward momentum. And I'm confident that we are, with the garage project manager in place. She's really doing a great job, and we really are pushing forward and getting things done.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Carol. I'm not going to steal. I've got a number of points, but I'm not going to steal Joy's thunder here, because I know she loves a garage report, and I don't want to take away her moment on this. But I will say, I mean, I do care about where we store cars, but because of parking. But the problem is that these garages aren't even storing cars, are they? They're being used to store.
No.
And that's the whole point of the garages were built to keep cars off of the roads and off of pavements. And I know the council have got great ambitions about getting cars off pavements, and so it'd be great if people could park their cars in garages, but they're just not big enough for the modern motor vehicle, and so their purpose has expired. And the question is, should we be subsidising really cheap storage space to the extent that we're doing, when we could be providing people with affordable housing instead? So I mean, that's the dilemma with these garages. But on that note, I'm gonna go to Councillor Redsell.
Councillor Redsell.
Thank you, Dad. I never thought I'd say this actually, Carol, but I do think Councillor Spillman is right. The garages are not fit for cars anymore, and when they were built, cars were smaller, and cars just can't get in there and undo the doors anyway. So I never thought I would say that sometimes in lots of areas would be better to take them down and make parking spaces. We'd have a lot, I think, less antisocial behaviour, and we'd have a lot less fly tipping, because where some of the garages are housed, we can't see behind them. So having spaces for cars, it might open up those sort of things. And even in my area, I'd probably say that there are some that should come down. Claire informed me today we're not going to use the antisocial behaviour team now. Mia's are going to do them, the painting of the garages. Is that right, Carol?
If she told you that today, then I'm sure it is right. I haven't spoken to her today, so I realised there was some. You weren't very happy with the outcome of using. They're not the antisocial behaviour team. You confused me a bit there. You mean the community payback team?
Yeah, community payback. Yeah.
We did have quite a long discussion, particularly with Councillor Jeffries when he was on this committee, about the quality of the work done by the community payback team. So I think Claire has gone away and rethought that and gone for a more professional outcome.
I think if we're going to do anything, we need to take that paint back to the beginning and then paint them. You know,
yes.
keep painting over the top, because all it's going to do is peel off. But
I made that point very clearly to Claire
Yeah.
after the last discussion we had about this, Councillor Edsel, don't
we're
worry.
going to do something, we ought to do it properly. But I agree with Councillor Spillman, there are a lot of garages out there that just need to come down and put cars in parking spaces. You know, it would keep things open, people would be able to see things, and I think we should move. I never thought I'd say this, Carol, but I do feel that in lots of parts of the borough we should do that, because they're just being used for people to hold things in, really. They're not being used for a car at all anymore. And I think in some cases, the things that are inside can cause fires and everything. So I just, you know, if they was used for cars now, it would be all right, but it isn't. Most of them are not used for a car anymore at all. But
Certainly,
I've got much
I
else
totally
to
agree.
say, but yeah, I like the way it's going, and the project I'd like to see come to fruition, because we've had a long time at this and COVID has got in the way. So I would like to see it come to fruition, just make the garages that we are going to keep look a bit better and make the area better. Thanks, Carol.
Absolutely, and that's what we're doing. So we have Claire's the garage project manager, and she has a whole plan for which garages will be demolished and which garages will need to be repaired and maintained. As I said in the last garage update report, obviously we've had the whole stock condition survey done, and that's really helped us to identify which ones have a future and which ones don't. There are some where we will reuse the land for parking spaces. There's some where we will reuse the land for housing development. There are a number of sites already on the housing development list that were previously garage sites. And there are some where we may retain the garages and do some work on them. But those, I agree that most garages are too small for most modern cars.
Yeah, definitely.
So I did say this at the Ockenden Forum, and was quite robustly disagreed with by members of the public. And one of the members of the public did make a good point, which is that he keeps his motorbike in the garage, because you can fit a motorbike in a garage.
That's fine, yeah.
And I'd be perfectly happy for people to rent them if they wanted to put their bikes in there, for instance.
Yeah.
Because more people have, like myself, bought a bike during lockdown, and they're, you know, they could be cluttering up the house, but you could have them in a garage instead.
Yeah.
But yes, I agree. We all have, there are plans. We know which sites we want to demolish. We just need to program it in and do it properly.
Through you, Chair, can I just say to Carol that perhaps involving each ward, perhaps there are bits of the ward where I know Claire has looked at every part of the borough, I hope, anyway, but there may be areas where we think we could build with pulling down some garages and using a bit of land. So it might be worth speaking to the councillors in each ward just to see if they've got anything, you know, they want to bring up.
Well, certainly. I mean, I would encourage all the members of this committee, if you have got sites like that, then please do let Keith know, because obviously we are always looking for sites that we can develop into council housing, and garage sites they don't always, but they can make good sites because they're already in our ownership. They can often be sites, as you say, Councillor Edsel, that are attracting antisocial behaviour. And so, I think that those. So if you've got ideas in your own wards or in other people's wards even, please do let Keith know.
I will do. I'll speak to him.
Brilliant. Does anyone else have any comments on this report? Lynn Mansfield.
Lynn Mansfield's got a hand up, yeah.
Yes, I did mention the garages a long time ago, quite a few times ago, when you first said that they were going to be painted, when I said that they were supposed to be unfit for purpose. The thing is, you're still renting out garages for storage, and yet you said you don't want storage in them because it can cause fire. But if someone, or do they not tell you they're using it for storage? I mean, like community garages and other people, they are renting them purely for storage.
We do know that some people are renting them purely for storage, yes, but we don't have two different tenancy agreements. We have a garage tenancy agreement, which is for a garage. We don't have one that's for storage and one that's for keeping your cars, bikes or motorbikes in there. So we are having the tenancy agreement reviewed. It's a conundrum because we know people want to store things in them, and some people originally got them for a car or a bike or a motorbike, and now they store things in them. I'm reasonably sure that the current tenancy agreement will tell people not to store anything that's combustible in there, because where I used to work, that's what our garage agreement said. But you know, once people have got it, they'll use it in various different ways based on what they need from the garage at the time. So yes, we do, but we do know, yes, for some organisations certainly have used them solely for storage, and they've rented them from us on that basis. Yes.
And
I'm not saying people can't use the garages for storage. It's about what you store in the garage, really. You can use the garage for storage, but you need to, you know, people need to think about what they're putting in there.
Okay. Yeah, all right then. Yeah.
Are you happy with that, Lynn?
Well, I just know that one has just been recently let out for storage for a community, you know, purpose, and it just seems strange that if you don't want storage in them while you're still doing it today. I understand what Carol said, but you know, it just seems a bit strange, doesn't it? You know, if you don't want stuff in it, you don't want it used for storage, why are you still allowing them to rent them now?
It's not that we don't want people to use them for storage, we just have to be careful about what they store in them. Obviously, we also want to rent our garages to people, because as I understand it from the report that was written by my predecessor to this committee, there were, at that point, members were very unhappy about the level of void garages, the amount of void rent loss because we weren't letting the garages out. So there is that balance between letting them out, acknowledging that they're too small for most cars, and knowing that some people will use them for storage, and then just being clear about the need to store things that are not combustible, so don't fill it full of petrol cans or whatever, or gas canisters.
I mean, I'm sure that some are actually being used for commercial purposes as well. But, you know,
people say that, Chair.
Probably using garages as for commercial storage at a much cheaper rate than they'd get in the private sector. So I know that Councillor Worrell had her hand up.
Thanks, Chair. I just was wondering, so we've got an income from these garages and we're renting a fair few out now. Is this project paying for itself, or are we using any reserves, or, you know, where's the actual money coming from to fund this really big project in very difficult times?
I honestly don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. From a revenue perspective, I would say yes, it probably is, but I can get somebody to do the sums for you. There was a business case put together for the post of the garage project manager in the first place. The capital, no, obviously the project officer is not making, probably not making enough to cover all the capital costs as well. But that's obviously, it's necessary for us to maintain our assets, and whilst the garages remain assets, we need to put some money towards maintaining them, because otherwise they are falling down. Some of them are in a very bad state, and they get into such a bad state that in some areas they're Hmos fenced off because or they've got those signs on them saying unsafe structure. And really, we need to be doing something about those rather than just leaving them with Hmos fencing around them or putting a big notice on them and thinking that that's going to solve the problem. And we can use more of them for housing, can't we? We're certainly looking both the Husk project and as I said, there are already sites on the list, garage sites. So yes, Claire's been around all the sites in the borough. She's been looking at whether there are sites that, and she's talking to Keith's team all the time about whether there is a potential for development on some other sites that she's seen that aren't not yet on the list because they haven't got to that stage yet. She's also looking at sites where we can demolish the garages and put car parking spaces in, and she's also looking for sites where we could do the Husk project as well. So yeah. So could that come in? I know it's only an annual report now, but next year's report, could that come in? Absolutely, yes. If by next year, I'm sure we'll have a lot more progress. Next year, thank you. Next year, not next time, I said. Yes, next year, not next time.
Next year, definitely next year.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. I mean, I'd like to see, you know, something. So I would like to see some movement on that project. Bring us something, you know, exciting and bold, and that'll just because although just turning into car parking spaces is an option, it would be nice if there was another option that had as much, if not more, social value, but also had some revenue potential involved in it. And that's why I like the idea of the bungalow project. And it'd be really nice to see that, you know, even if it was on a small scale, just to prove viability.
That's what we're doing at Defoe Parade. That is our sort of pilot to prove viability. So
that would be really good. Has anyone else got any other comments to make on this final report?
Chair, could I just ask that Keith give me a ring tomorrow morning, because I've got 3 sites at the moment where we could build on.
Excellent, Keith.
There you go.
Councillor, I will certainly give you a call and we'll talk through those. Thank you.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So if that is all, we will just recommend that Housing Scrutiny receive this report for information comments. So if we can note that, everyone agreed?
Yeah, agreed.
Excellent stuff. So now we've got the final bit, which is the work programme. With these with things in such flux at the moment, I'm more than happy to accommodate anything that, and do our best to accommodate anything that any member wants to bring onto this, because obviously these are unprecedented times and things are moving so quickly. So I can imagine that the work programme will also have to be flexible at the same time. I can see.
I have a number of changes already to propose to it, actually, Councillor, if that's okay. Or do you want to take Councillor Worrell first?
No, you go first, Carol.
Okay, so I've already noted the request for a report on HMOs from earlier on. I can't tell you when that will come in, but I've got it down here, so we'll definitely have that. For the next one in November, Ryan will be bringing the annual allocations report. But I'd also like to move from November the tenant and leaseholder satisfaction survey results and action plan. We had some delays in getting the survey out. We didn't get it out quite when we wanted to make this work. So in order to bring a proper full report to members, I'd like to move that back to January. And also the fees and charges report is one that has to go to a number of different committees. So that one needs to move back to January as well, I've been told by the author. So Kelly would like to move that one back to January as well. And then I'm going to need to move. We've had quite a lot of delays in getting the private sector stock condition survey going. So I'm going to have to move that one back to March. But I'd also like to add in a KPI report in the January meeting to have one of those, because we did say that we would bring that to members, try to do that twice a year. So we had one in June looking back over 2019-20. So this one we'd hope to be able to do at least up to the end of November, and maybe a verbal report to bring you up to December at the January meeting itself. So that's all my my changes and amendments.
Yeah, Councillor Worrell.
Thanks, Chair. So to move the fees and charges, I spoke earlier in the meeting about whether there would be any budget, pressures on us, and whether we would be looking at cuts. So if there is going to be cuts to ours, I know it's really tight because budget setting for council is February, so to be setting fees and charges in January, and we would then by then know if there was going to be any cuts throughout.
Can I just be clear, Councillor Worrell? That's a Housing General Fund fees and charges report.
Yeah,
so really, it's not looking at the bulk of the housing service. It's mainly fees and charges in private sector housing is the bulk.
Yeah, I understand that, Carol, but before, going back years ago, we are in unprecedented times now. We used to have all budget lines used to come through scrutiny, so that we could, as a committee, I think we should all play our part. And, that we're going to have to find these cuts, and if they are going to land in the housing department, and we are going to see cuts, and I'd like to see that we see those before they make it, you know, because it'll be difficult. It's up to you, Chair, but I think that, you know, you remember the years when we used to do line by line budgeting, and I think that, you know,
That's
we
before
could
my
well
time.
see ourselves.
No,
Well,
no,
you would remember when you was looking. Well, Joy would certainly remember
yeah,
when it's
definitely.
really difficult. We're not getting £19 million worth of budget cuts with £1 million pressure in the housing one, which is from Sean's report, without cutting something and having a look at it. So if there is going to be cuts, I'm starting that, you know, we do consider putting them in the housing scrutiny work plans. And one that I definitely would, not for scrutiny, but more to have an oversight in it, is there's been many a call over the last couple of months about the removal of gates to complexes, and it's been like councillors about individual talks rather than collective talks. It's been done in wards, and I just think that to remove gates across different complexes and accommodation is something that we should maybe as a scrutiny committee have an oversight over that, and to see that report and, you know, how it pans out. Because again, if this does happen, there's been talks, some know that there will be a service charge if it happens, and some areas and councillors didn't know that. So there's, you know, we're not all on the same page with it. So I'd like to see a report come next time that does highlight, you know, why this decision was being made, and so that we as a committee, not to scrutinise it, but to certainly have an oversight over why it's happening. And they're my two. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, to go back to your first point, the author of the fees and charges report has requested that it be moved to January so that she can go through all the processes she needs to go through to get it there. That report has nothing to do with cuts. So
it's a different report I'm asking for, Carol, in line with that.
Well, that
report.
would be in the HRA business plan report that you receive in January, will be the report that sets out what the council's plans are for the housing revenue account. So that will be the place where any cuts that were being made would be outlined in that report. As I said earlier, that's not what I'm anticipating. You know, the housing revenue account is at this point in time.
Okay, so if you're saying it's not, we're not going to have cuts, then Carol, then I'm taking you at your word that the housing department's not going to be. If there is, I'd like to see a report. If there's not, don't bring it. But if there is, I'd like to see something.
If there were to be any, they would be included in the housing revenue account business plan report that you'll be receiving in January.
And also,
all right, then.
I will say, Lynn, I'm not a stranger to calling an emergency committee meeting on specific items. So if there is any particular, and I extend this invitation to any committee member, if there are substantial issues that require specific attention, and you want to bring that to me, then I'm fully open to that, and I'm not afraid to call emergency committee meetings should that need to happen. Okay.
Thanks, Lou, because I just don't want to get to February and it's the budget setting and they go, well, you could have had a say in this and you could have done this and you could have said that, and I've not had the chance to even have a look at those lines, because you know that's why I'm asking for this.
No, indeed, but like I say to you, if at any point you've got any specific concerns, then and it will be, you know, and I know you're not one to make a fuss over nothing, Lynn.
No.
You know, and it's worthy of more attention. Then come to me and we can sit down and we can talk about, you know, an emergency committee meeting on a specific issue if required. So it's not a problem at all. So with that,
thank you for that.
With that, has anyone else got any more comments?
Yeah, Luke, can I just say that I don't want to wait too long before the HMO comes to us.
No, I just need to talk to Jalal about that, but it'll either be in November or January. I just need to talk to him about how long it will take him to put that together. That's all.
I don't want it to wait, through you, Chair. I don't want it to wait till January, Carol. I think it's an issue that is going to affect the borough badly.
I'll see what he can do for November then.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Thanks,
And we can add the gates one. That'll be fine, will it? Just to have a report on the gates.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Excellent. I mean, I know that a gates issue has been raised in Aveley as well, so it's
Yeah, it has, yeah.
it's definitely something that
Going around the borough.
it is, yeah, indeed.
Well,
So-
it's not going around the borough. It's only going to the places where those gates exist.
No, it don't affect me, but I mean, like from the councillors, they're talking around the borough.
But no, thank you for that. Thank you for tonight as well. It's been an interesting discussion.
It has. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks,
And
Lou.
on that note, I'll close the meeting. The time is 7 minutes past 9, as long as my clock's right. And I thank you all, and I look forward to the next meeting.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Chair.
Lou. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night all. Bye.